Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikeshendriyatmane Nama Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibrtatmane Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchisade Nama Nama Hiranyaviryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion of Sri Siksastakam, and in the previous session on Monday, we started discussing verse 3 of the Siksastakam, which is Trinadapi, Sunichena, Taroriva Sahishnuna, Amanimanadena, Kirtaniya, Sadahari. So we began discussing the verse and we set a context by first understanding what Sriman Mahaprabhu wanted us to see. He wanted us to first understand in the third verse that Kirtaniya Sadahari is the ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness. Kirtaniya Sadahari, the glorification of Hari, or our ability to constantly, 24/7, keep Krishna right in the center of our lives is the goal of our practice. It is the sadhya. This is the specific perception, or the very, very specific experience that Vrindavan or the Vrajavasis experience. Vrindavan offers us that. So as a consequence, Mahaprabhu is very clear when he is citing Kirtaniya Sadahari as the goal. That is the goal. And in the previous session, we also connected Kirtaniya Sadahari with a very, very famous, at the same time critical verse in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And this is verse number 65. Verse number 65 is Manmana Bhava, 1865, pardon me. Manmana Bhava Madbhakto, Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru, Mam Evaishyasi Satyam Te, Pratijane Priyosi Me. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me and offer you homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this, because you are my very dear friend. Always think of me. This is Kirtaniya Sadahari. Mahaprabhu is giving us the goal in the third verse, saying Kirtaniya Sadahari, which is 18.65, is the goal. And before 18.65 is 18.64 verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which says, Sarva guhyatmam bhuyah shrunume paramam vachah ishtosi me dridamiti tato vakshyami te hitam. Because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. Most confidential, right? This is a very, very heavy word where he says, Sarva Guhyatmam, the most confidential. Guhya is that which is hidden. Sarva Guhyatmam is most confidential. So in that most confidential instruction, Krishna is talking about, always think of me. And Sriman Mahaprabhu in Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnuna, Amanimanadena Kirtaniya Sadahari refers to Manmanabha Madbhakta, always think of me. So this is the sadhya, this is the goal of the Krishna conscious process, and that is being given in the third verse. Along with the goal, Sriman Mahaprabhu is telling us that there is a certain consciousness that accompanies this goal or attainment of this goal. There is a certain quality or process that has to be followed for attaining this goal. And that process is being adjudged as Trinadapi Sunichena, Taroriva Sahishnuna, Amani Manadena. These are three things, right? Trinadapi Sunichena, humbler than a blade of grass. Taroriva Sahishnuna, being as tolerant as a tree. And Amani, being completely prideless. Manadena, giving respect to all without expecting anything in return. Having no pride, but giving respect to everybody else. This is the pre-qualification or the process given in Sri Siksastakam by Sriman Mahaprabhu himself. And the sadhya is also being shown, Kirtaniya Sadahari. Now, one thing that we need to understand that this is a process. It is a process that is being given to us. And what does a process do when you take on spiritual life? Any kind of spiritual life, any kind of spiritual process that we take up has one objective. It has to remove the obstacles that we face in reaching the goal. Our sadhya is to be able to constantly engage in the glorification of Krishna, to attain consciousness which would allow us to organically constantly engage in the chanting of the holy names. It's not an imposition. It's not going to be forced upon us. It is not that someone is going to lock up the door and say that, okay, this is tapasya, here are your beads, chant away, and we will not open the door. We will open the door and allow you to even have water, food, whatsoever, only after you have completed incessant 24 hours chanting. That is not the condition which is being shown here. This is the sadhya. This has to be an organic conditioning, or rather consciousness, which brings us to the platform of being able to very enthusiastically always think of Krishna. This is practically being in love with Krishna, the Vrajavasi's mental mindset, the Vrajavasi's priority, where Krishna is always in the center, always in the mind, never goes away. This is the Vrajavasi mindset. You know, someone who is very, very close and dear to Krishna, this is their mindset. And that is exactly what is our goal. And what is the process supposed to do? The process is supposed to remove obstacles. Any process is supposed to, if sincerely followed, remove obstacles on the path of attaining the goal. That is the reason why this particular aspect, or the four objectives of what do you call it, being humble as a blade of grass, being tolerant as a tree, and being prideless or devoid of false pride, and being able to respect others. This is the process that will allow us to remove obstacles on the path of being able to ultimately attain the consciousness of being able to chant constantly. So what kind of obstacles does the process remove? That is something that we have to understand. Now let's talk a little bit about obstacles. Obstacles, you know, I've written about it a few months back, rather in the previous year, 2014, when I was visiting India, and it was Ganesh Chaturthi. And when we were visiting India and Ganesh Chaturthi, you have this big array of shops, you know, in South India. And every shop, you know, these are temporary shops. And these temporary shops have deities of Ganeshji. They have deities of Ganesh because he is the, you know, he is the Vigneshwara Rupa. He's supposed to remove the Vigna, which is obstacle. And as a consequence, you know, his Chaturthi, or rather his festival, is celebrated so that people can remove the obstacles they have in their life. And that particular festival requires many, many Vinayaka, you know, deities which they worship on that particular day. Ultimately, they take the deity form and immerse the deity form in a river. They immerse the deity form in the sea. And then the deity, which is supposed to be Prithvi Tattva, it mixes into Jala Tattva, which is the next state. So it is an acceptable process. It is not without acceptance. It is accepted in the Vedas. It is quite a pure process. It doesn't interfere. Anyways, the point is that the obstacle removing worship can be done by externally worshipping the deity of Ganesha, which is there. And I'm not recommending that. I'm merely saying that is one way of removing obstacles. The other way of removing obstacles is done in the Vaikuntha conception. In the Vaikuntha conception, in the spiritual sky, there is a personality who is the commander-in-chief or the head of all the forces of Vaikuntha of Lord Narayan, and that is Sri Vishwaksena. Sri Vishwaksena is also elephant-headed, interestingly, and he is the spiritual counterpart of Sri Ganapati. Okay, and Vaishnavas worship Lord Vishwaksena. This is also recommended by Srila Gopalabhatta Goswami, where he says, you know, our Acharya, one of the 6 Goswamis, who has written all the Pancharatra Vidhi, he has written the process for performing the samskaras, which are also removers of obstacle, where he recommends that instead of worshipping the head of the Shiva Ganas, which is Ganapati, you worship the head of the Vaishnava Ganas, which is Sri Vishwaksena. In the Sri Sampradaya, Lord Vishwaksena's position is very, very prominent. He is Vishnu Tattva. He is the commander of Lord Narayan's forces. He is also considered Vishnu Tattva in expansion, such as Lord Ananta, Garuda, and so on. He's also an expansion. He's one of the, what do you call it, Nitya Suris, they call it. He's always accompanying Sriman Narayana in whatever he does. So it is recommended in the Sri Vaishnava Siddhanta to worship Lord Vishwakshena. It is said that in the Sri Sampradaya, our Sampradaya and the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya began with Lord Brahma, and then the nuances and the education was passed on from one level to the other. In the Sri Sampradaya, Sri Lakshmi, Mother Lakshmi, Mahalakshmi, is the primary beginning. She influences, or she begins everything. But what did she do? She initiated Lord Vishwakshena. She initiates Vishwaksena first. So he is considered to be the first initiate or in that particular line, and he is the remover of all obstacles, just as we pray to our acharyas. The Sri Vaishnavas pray to Sri Vishwaksena. And Srila Gopala Bhatta Goswami says that if you have to perform any ritual, it is better to worship Lord Vishwaksena to remove obstacles. Okay. Now, there is a third method. First, I spoke of Ganapati, then I spoke of Lord Vishwakshena. There's a third method. That third method is an internal method. It is an internal process. And that internal process is a process that we spoke of in the previous week. Okay, I wanted to lend context this week. I wanted to say that you have a goal, which is Kirtaniya Sadahari, and that particular goal resonates with the other scriptures, such as Bhagavad Gita. And we also wanted to say that the process given before the goal is a process that is meant to help us reach the goal, which essentially means that process will remove all obstacles. So the third process of removing obstacles, first Lord Ganapati, which is head of Shivagana. If you want to accomplish material things, you worship him to remove the obstacles that are on the path, because he is a part of the material sky. Then you have Lord Vishwaksena, where the Vaishnavas do not want to deviate from their faith and they want to bring in the remover of obstacles. It is Lord Vishwaksena for the Vishnu worshippers. And then finally, there is a process, and that process is given in verse 3. And what is that process? The process of attaining humility and tolerance and being able to remain without pride, and the fact that we are able to respect all of others. This is an exalted quality that comes about because the holy names have the ability to give us such an opulence. Okay, the holy names give us such an opulence. So at a higher level, all of this is very easily done. Being tolerant as a tree, being humble as a grass, it's very easily done. But how is it to be built upon as a practice so that we eventually recognize, number one, that it is missing in our life, because we would never be able to cultivate a proper process unless we recognize that it is missing. That's number one. Number two is also to work toward it on a daily basis. These are two things that need to be done. One is to recognize where it is missing, be very clear about it, and also to recognize what to do on a daily basis to ultimately reach that point of being able to implement the process so that it removes the obstacles and we are able to chant forever, or rather we are able to chant 24/7. So what is that which we are talking about? The way for us to be able to cultivate a habit is, I spoke about it in the previous session, is to first accept whatever environment we are in as being given by Krishna. Accept the devotees as being given by Krishna. Accept those whom you agree with as being given by Krishna. Accept those whom you do not agree with as being given by Krishna. Okay? All of this is a part of an environment for us to be able to learn and implement. Accepting a certain situation in life, accepting a certain environment, accepting certain events in life, all of this as being arranged very specifically for our well-being and for us to be able to move forward based on that is very specifically the definition of humility. Having the ability to accept your environment and your life as being arranged by Krishna himself is an aspect of humility. Once we accept that everything is being arranged by Krishna, that even if it is not arranged by Krishna, but it's actually been arranged by our karmic reactions, then such an environment which is accepted as being arranged by Guru and Krishna becomes an environment arranged by Guru and Krishna, even if it were not so. In other words, you buy an apple from the market for $1, you buy some fruits, You bring in the fruit, wash it, and offer it to Krishna. Something material becomes spiritual by the introduction of Krishna. In a similar manner, if we start accepting the environment that we are in, the complexity that we are in, as being specifically arranged by Krishna to attain the sadhya of being able to chant the holy names constantly, then Krishna himself will make arrangements for us to be able to remove the obstacles on the way. Understand this particular technique. If we accept the arrangements made by Krishna internally, with humility, saying, you have made this arrangement. It may seem complex. It is not something that I would love to have, but this is something that you have arranged. There should be a reason for this. I surrender to you, which is what Krishna says in the next verse. 18.66, Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Mamekam Sharanam Vraja comes after Manmanabha Madbhakto, and he is telling us that there is a process too. Sharanam Vraja. So if we accept the environment, we accept the devotees, we accept our experiences, good and bad, all of this as being arranged by Guru and Krishna to make us a better servant, then all of these experiences have enough potency to be interfered and used by Krishna to make us better servants. Ultimately, there's nothing in the environment which will prevent us from accessing Krishna. And that is the situation of Kirtaniya Sadahari, ultimately. There's nothing in the environment which can prevent us. We would not say that environment is bad. We would not really feel that there's any environment which is challenging. We would take up all kinds of environments and we be able to access Krishna wherever we are, and we would be able to accept things that this is your arrangement. Please bestow intelligence so that I may be able to see this as your arrangement. Let me accept it as your arrangement. Let me do what is required in this arrangement, and let me be able to ultimately be able to chant. Because that is the Vrajavasi mood. The mood of the Vrajavasi is to accept everything in relationship to Krishna. Big floods which Indra arranged, which Lord Indra arranged, very extraordinary level of danger for the Vrajavasis. But what was the ultimate result? The ultimate result was they surrendered. Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. They simply gathered around Krishna. They had their own ideas of how to relate to it, but everything was centered around Krishna being in the center, and they accepted it. They accepted it. Krishna intervened, and instead of becoming a process, or rather an experience which is going to be traumatic, the whole experience turned out to be one that rendered even deeper faith and was actually very sweet. Right? Govardhan Puja and so many wonderful things that we celebrate, all of this is very clear on the process of obstacle removing that we have to engage in. This process of humility that we are speaking of is be able to first accept your environment, accept the situation in life as is, as Krishna's arrangement. See what happens after we accept it, because intelligence would come upon us for us to be able to move forward. That is precisely the function of removing obstacles. Intelligence that is being given by Krishna to move forward is the function of removing obstacles. That is exactly what Lord Ganapati does. That is exactly what Lord Vishwaksena does. They provide intelligence so that we can figure our way out to move forward in different circumstances. In this case, we surrender to Krishna, which is the process given by Mahaprabhu. He says, accept the environment. Become tolerant as a tree. Blade of grass, what does it do? It becomes very malleable, flexible. It accepts the pressure as Krishna's own will. And if we accept the pressures and the complexities as Krishna's will, then Krishna will start intervening through those environments. And we would be able to see through and accept those environments and develop deep realizations, and there would be deeper faith. And this would allow us to move forward. That is exactly the manner of being able to surrender, accept the environment as Krishna's will, and then act upon it with courage, because he's going to give you intelligence and we're going to be able to move forward with it. This is our technique of being able to remove obstacles. Intelligence will be provided by the super soul who is within. Krishna is within or without. Intelligence will be provided. And as a consequence, we would be able to move forward. Okay? And ultimately, we will be able to remove the obstacles that we face, and we will be able to reach a situation of Kirtaniya Sadahari. This is the process which Sriman Mahaprabhu is talking about when he first sets the goal saying Kirtaniya Sadahari, and then he says, what is the process? And what is a process supposed to do? What is any process supposed to do? It is supposed to remove obstacles. Any process is supposed to remove obstacles. That is the function of a process. And what are the qualities of such a process? Trinadapi sunichena, taroriva sahishnuna, amani, manadena, kirtaniya sadahari. This particular process is to first accept Krishna's arrangement. And then, as given by him, accept the devotees whom we don't like. Isn't it? Sometimes there are differences amongst devotees, and the differences become so prominent that they don't want to see each other. They become very uncomfortable. They don't want to deal with each other. They would rather be away, so on and so forth. In such circumstances, one needs to be able to move forward and understand that that is a part of the environment. Okay? Everybody is different. That is the beauty of Krishna consciousness. We are all very different. We all have the same objective of Kirtaniya Sadahari. Does every cowherd boy and every cowherd girl in Vraja act in the same manner? That will be so boring. They're all very different. They all have different motivations. The Ashta Sakhis are different. These are expansions of Srimati Radha. They are all different. They are all different moods of serving Krishna. There's such variegatedness in their propensities. There is such variegatedness in terms of their, wanting to serve. And that is celebrated. It is not condemned. Who likes to have uniforms, right? Even children enjoy the day when they go to school, those days in India, when we were allowed to wear our regular dresses, because, we used to feel that that particular day was special. Why? Because that variegatedness is something which can be celebrated, which is the beauty of ISKCON as well, which is the beauty of a movement, of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. There is great variegatedness. There are people from all kinds of races, types, all kinds of motivations, different kinds of boga, different kind of moods. The deities are dressed in certain ways in different parts of the world. You look through the Darshan CD, or rather the DVD, and when we first looked at it, it was very interesting to see that the Krishna and Radharani looked like they belong to a specific part of the world. I guess people have a conception of beauty in their hearts, and when they dress the deities, they bring forth that conception of beauty, and it also manifests itself for others to see, because in some ways you will find that somehow or the other, the way they have dressed them and the makeup and all that stuff, it appears as if they belong to that region. And this is variegatedness. This is celebration. This is celebration of different souls who have come into the movement to make it wonderful. Okay? And they're all very different. They're very, very different, which is great, actually, which is fantastic, which is the exciting part of what we are in Krishna consciousness. There's so many people with different motivations. There are different kinds of people with different objectives and so on. It's very boring to think if it's got to be the same. Very boring. Okay? So accepting the environment is very important, and accepting the circumstances of life are very important. If you actually notice, if we observe ourselves, our biggest obstacles are in different parts of our life. The eating, sleeping, mating, defending is our obstacle. Real obstacles. Because there are problems. Most devotees don't face problems in being able to chant 16 rounds. They can chant 16 rounds. They can. You see, setting aside an hour and a half is not a big deal. What complicates the hour and a half of chanting is the fact that eating, sleeping, mating, defending is very complicated. As a consequence, the chanting becomes complicated. Our process is simple. How can it be difficult? It is very simple. You're supposed to set aside a certain amount of time. We are given benedictions at the time of initiation so that we could do so. And we are able to do it. However, what are the challenges? The challenges are very specifically in the areas of relationships, the areas of perhaps economic wealth, the ability to lead a certain kind of life, objectives associated, other objectives, okay, relationships, other objectives, employment, so on and so forth. These are the problems that we face. And these are obstacles. So what happens is that if we start learning to accept the environment as given by Krishna for our own benefit, Krishna would offer us intelligence on how to navigate the problem and continue Kirtaniya Sadahari. Krishna will offer us intelligence because that is exactly what he is promising. He is saying, you surrender. Sarvadharman pariteja mamekam sharanam vraja. You surrender to the environment which I have provided you. You may not like it. You may kick, you may scream. That's all fine. Accept it. Accept it. That this is the arrangement which has been made by Krishna. If you do that, then Krishna says he will provide you with all facilities. He says that in 18.66, isn't it? He says, Sarva dharman paritejya, mamekam sharanam raja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasmi. Papa is sinful reactions that are giving us trouble in all areas of life. Sarva papebhyo mokshayasmi, right? Ma suchaha. He says, do not fear. Just do not fear. Krishna is giving us assurance. Do not fear. I'm telling you, Manmanabha Madbhakto, Madhyajimam Namaskuru, is what I want you to do. Kirtanya Sadahari is what Krishna is again saying when he came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is the same. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, Trinadapi Sunichena, Taroriva Sahishnuna, Mani Manadena. In the Bhagavad Gita, 5,000 years back, Krishna is saying, Sarvadharman Pariteja, Mamekam Sharanam Raja, Aham Tum Sarva Papebhyo, Mokshayasmi Masuchaha. He is giving us an assurance. Do not be afraid. If you do this process of surrender, of accepting the environment, having the humility to accept the environment, having the tolerance of a tree, then do not fear. I'm there. I'm going to take care of you. This is the assurance given by Krishna. Do not fear. And ultimately, we reach the goal of Manmanabha Madbhakto or Kirtaniya Sadahari. Now, let's just spend a few minutes to understand the nature of our obstacles. Okay? And I'm not really talking about the eating, sleeping, mating part, because that is something which is there. And that is our challenge. Devotees face challenges in that area. Unsteady issues, but all of that causes, a reverse impact on their ability to steadily chant. Okay, they're constantly exposing themselves to an environment which is extraordinarily competitive. Okay, we're being trained for 8 hours of the day to be very aggressive. We're being trained 8 hours of the day to be manipulative, calculative. And then we expect that at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock when we return home, we can turn off the switch and become humble. It's not going to happen. Because we have spent 8 hours training ourselves, training and developing this culture. Because in the material world, it is expected. Even the demigods show that kind of attitude. When we read through Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that, like for example, why did Lord Indra arrange for the flooding of Vrindavan? That is competitiveness. It's a part of the material landscape, isn't it? You all constantly find that the grandfather of Prahlad Maharaj, Virochana, right? Was it Prahlad Maharaj or? I think no, I'm sorry. The father of Bali Maharaj, Virochana, he was attacked by Lord Indra, wasn't he? And that is what enraged Bali Maharaj. He went on to capture the heavenly kingdom. So the point we want to make is that even the demigods are not able to control themselves. What is being asked of us is beyond even the demigods. We have been asked to do things which are even beyond the function of the demigods in the material universe, because the material universe by design is not designed for developing Trinadapi Sunichena, Taroriva Sahishnuna, Amani Manadena. If a psychologist, the modern clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist, reads that verse and then we tell him that this is the process I'm supposed to follow, that practically would make him think that we are suffering from some kind of a psychosis or a neurosis, some kind of a mental disorder, because there's low self-esteem, which is very clearly written of being, a blade of grass. That is the experience of drug addicts. That is the experience of alcoholics, where they feel that they have nothing, and which is a fact, they have nothing. They feel very low, they feel deprived, and as a consequence, they feel depressed. And this is what the psychiatrist hears. And if he hears Trinadapi Sunichena and we claim that this is going to be our goal, he would think that we are nuts. We would think we are suffering from some kind of a psychosis, neurosis, whatever the case may be. Because this is alien to the material universe. It is alien to material energy. It is alien to the functions that we do. This is not how we function. Okay? That's the reason why we find it difficult. That is why it requires work, because we are constantly being cultured to be the opposite. So it requires work. Okay? Sometimes we bring the same competition into the devotional environment. Right? So let's take a look at some of the challenges, and we will kind of understand why it occurs and why it's a problem. And the reason I'm reading this out is for us to be able to recognize that it exists. Remember, I told you two things. One is to be able to implement the removal of obstacles, which is the process given by Mahaprabhu actively on a daily basis. The other is to recognize problems when they exist. Both are important. If we don't recognize that we have an issue, we will never ever be able to work toward it. Krishna consciousness is a lot of work, internal work, and external as well. It's a lot of work. One has to constantly be able to do everything in a proper way. Okay? So now let's just take a look at some of the problems that come up. The list of interferences include false pride. What happens when we have false pride? Are we able to access humility? Are we able to access tolerance? No. False pride means that we think we have it all. We think we have already attained the highest level. We think that we have everything. As a consequence, we don't even feel like putting in the extra bit of effort which is required. That environment, that false pride, is completely against humility. It's very easily known. Okay, they think the real issue is someone with false pride puts themselves in the center. Krishna is out. So how will they be able to accept the environment? How will someone accept the environment as Krishna's gift and take on the experiences as Krishna's gift after trying their best? You have to try your best. It doesn't mean that we simply are supposed to do nothing. It means you do your best based on intelligence provided by Krishna and leave the results to Krishna. We're supposed to do our very best. But when we're supposed to do our very best, how do you accept that this is Krishna's arrangement? First, there has to be an acceptance. That is what is going to bring us intelligence. That is what is going to allow us to move forward and remove obstacles. Okay? So accepting it is very important. And if you're going to have false pride, one is not able to accept it. One is already playing God. One is already playing God. They cannot accept the environment as being arranged by someone who is superior to them. The next one is false ego. False ego falls in the same category as false pride. Okay? And false ego causes problems in other ways, where we start thinking that we have an identity which is quite different from the identity of being a servant of Krishna. And that identity receives more attention. So, for example, we have a professional identity of being such and such in the work environment. That identity will come into the center. That's false ego. And we will start putting everything on that identity, saying, okay, that identity is more important than anything else. That causes issues. So that is false ego. Now, we also have fear. Why is fear very important? Fear is very, very important because when we are fearful, we would have survival consciousness. It is like an animal which has been cornered. If an animal is cornered, such an animal will not be humble. It would try to survive. And as a consequence, it will be lashing out. It will be very defensive. It would want to look for opportunities to attack. That is fear. When we are very fearful, we are also looking at the environment and wanting to act aggressively in the environment. Fear is the opposite of love. And fear does not engender or bring forth humility. It is not an attribute of humility. A warrior who has very special skills in fighting, they would be fearless. They will not act impulsively. They would not be defensive. They would wait until the very last moment for them to be able to do what they have to do if they're forced to do it. They would not be fearful. Fear is something which prevents us from being humble because we are putting ourselves in the center and we become defensive. This is survival consciousness. This is animal consciousness. And when we start thinking we have to survive, I'm going to be fearful. If I'm afraid, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. I'm afraid. And as a consequence, we cannot be humble because that fear makes us project things onto the world which are the opposite of what is required. And then we have envy. Being envious. It's very easy to monitor this. Kirtaniya Sadahari, Amani and Manadena. Manadena, respecting others. If someone else achieves something, are we happy or are we unhappy? If someone achieves a spiritual, what do you call it? They make some achievement. Are we happy about it, or does it disturb us? Do we feel that we should have done it? If that we should have done it becomes more prominent than the fact that the other person has achieved something, then there's a problem. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying all of this because this allows us to monitor ourselves. Unless we monitor ourselves, we would not be able to work on ourselves. Working on ourselves has to first start with accepting everything as Krishna's arrangement, including the achievement of some other devotee, including perhaps our failure in achieving something similar to that. All of this is a part of Krishna's arrangement. It doesn't mean that we don't try. It doesn't mean that we don't make our very best attempt to serve in certain ways. It means we have a tendency to accept the results given by Krishna. We accept it as his arrangement. Okay, then we also have lust. I don't want to explain lust because it's a fact. Lust does not bring forth humility, it brings forth anger, which is the next step. Once lust comes in, for power, for anything, then it cannot bring forth tolerance. There's the question of tolerance. One becomes angry when such lust is not satisfied. And then you also have illusion. Illusion is where we have completely identified with the object of lust, and without it, we are completely displaced. Our intelligence is completely lost. And then we also have greed and insecurity. Some people are insecure, and insecure essentially means lack of humility. Insecure means lack of humility. What is secure? Secure again goes back to a feeling of understanding that this is Krishna's arrangement. He loves us, and as a consequence, he has arranged this wonderful environment. He is giving us experiences which are wonderful. Some of these experiences are not exactly what we would have wanted, but he's going to give us intelligence for us to be able to move forward. This is necessary for us, and he's going to provide us with the resources so that we can navigate through this particular environment and be able to continue working on reaching the platform of Kirtaniya Sadahari. If you actually notice all these Shad Ripus, or the challenges that we face in executing life, or anybody and everybody in any spiritual order would recognize that this is a problem, these are the real obstacles to be able to attain Kirtaniya Sadahari. These are the real obstacles. Okay? Recognizing the presence of this means that we have not really followed through on being humble and being tolerant and being without pride and giving respect to others. We are not really there if we have any of this. So this is a good barometer for us to be able to measure our own prowess or our own progress so that we don't kid ourselves. You see, the more and more we develop an attitude of being able to examine ourselves quite critically so that we could move forward to the goal of being able to chant the pure name, the more and more we will become successful. The more and more we want to play the role of the victim, thinking that someone else is basically the cause of all our problems, the more and more we will become such. So it's very important for us to take a deep look at where we are and move forward on a step-by-step steady basis so that we are able to make steady progress, we are able to monitor the progress. How do you monitor the progress? We monitor the progress in seeing if any of these conditions manifest. Are we envious? Do we have a lot of fear in certain areas of life? Do we have such attachment in certain areas of life that it is actually lust? Okay, are we identifying with a certain aspect of our life to such an extent that it is causing problems to us? These are the ways to monitor. The other way to monitor also is to see how steady is our chanting. What is the quality of our chanting? Ultimately, Trinadapi Sunichena Tarori Vasahishnuna, Amani, Manadena, all of this is ultimately, as I said before, the definition of humility, of being able to accept Krishna's arrangements and being able to have the courage to act upon the same. This would allow us to remove all obstacles so that we could ultimately chant Kirtaniya Sadahari. This assurance is being given by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. He's also doing it in the Bhagavad Gita. He's saying again as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Siksastakam. He's telling us the same thing in a different way. He is telling us in a more broken down way. Did he demonstrate this? Of course. Mahaprabhu demonstrated exactly what he wrote. He was doing exactly what he wrote. Everybody recalls, if you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Mahaprabhu, when he wanted to influence the Advaitins, he wanted to influence the Mayavadis headed by Prabodhananda Saraswati. Prabodhananda Saraswati was a very accomplished guru of the Mayavada order, of Sri Shankara's order, the Advaitin. And how do you tackle such a person who is completely immersed in Shastra and Vedanta and so on and so forth, and who is saying that, that is a way of life? and the fact that the chanting of the holy names and dancing on the streets and falling at each other's feet is not for him, or it is actually, he was looking at this as a sentimental offering. And he was looking at Mahaprabhu. He's so intelligent, he's so effulgent, and he's so good looking, and he's such a powerful sannyasi. Why is he doing all of this? A sannyasi is supposed to be sober. A sannyasi is supposed to, read Vedanta. So how do you conquer such a person to help him? See Mahaprabhu's technique. He went and he sat down at the exact spot where all these personalities come to wash their feet. This is the supreme personality of Godhead. And since he is completely secure about his position, he had no problem in sitting down in a place where people wash their feet. This is again what we say, that the more someone advances, the more humble they can become. What does it mean? The more someone advances, the more they can make themselves available for Krishna to use. They have no issues in doing whatever Krishna wants them to do. Okay, that's what it means. So Krishna himself demonstrated that. He says, how do I transform these souls who are so caught up in this external identity of either being a sannyasi or being a knowledgeable person, shastric reading, so on and so forth? He goes and sits down and humbles himself. So the defense system of people who see him is immediately removed. He disarms them even before they could attack. People become defensive and fearful when they see aggression, but when they see a situation where the person becomes very easy to handle externally, then they become quite malleable. They become disarmed, which is what he did very clearly. He sat there, and that allowed Prabodhananda Saraswati to accept him, and slowly, Prabodhananda Saraswati himself was completely transformed. Okay, he was transformed. So this is Mahaprabhu technique, and he demonstrated that. He demonstrated exactly what was required by him to demonstrate. He demonstrated how to behave, how to step aside so that Krishna could come in and do the part. That is exactly what we need to do. That is what is meant by saying the more we advance, the more humble they become. Yes, the more someone advances, more Krishna is able to use them. More someone advances means there is more Sarvadharman Parityaja, there is more Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. So there is more Krishna coming in, wanting to use them, and automatically there is Manmanabha Madbhakto, Madhyaji Bhav Namaskuru. There is no challenge with that particular position. So one needs to monitor themselves on a steady basis so that they're able to execute the steps, and removing their obstacle has to be done in this manner. Removing obstacles that we have, removing the obstacles that others have. All of this requires this approach of being able to accept the environment. Srila Prabhupada did that. When he first came in Boston, when he came out of the Boston Harbor, and he was walking towards the bus station, so on and so forth, his first experience of the West was frightening to him. It was frightening because he was thinking, how am I supposed to convey such sublime truth to these souls who are completely caught up in the mode of passion and ignorance? How am I supposed to convey this? Okay, this is something which bothered Prabhupada at that point in time. And when he first started preaching, who came to him? These were all people who externally appeared that they were into some kind of a habit or the other. They were, externally in the form of hippies. Not all of them, many of them. Srila Prabhupada accepted his students. He said, okay, this is what Krishna has sent me. This complex environment in New York City, the Lower East Side, is what Krishna has given me as an environment. There are drug addicts. There are people falling on the side, because of alcohol. They're just drunk and they're lying on the streets. And this is a personality who is a resident of the spiritual world, who has come from Vrindavan, and he is being exposed to all of this. He is seeing that. He is seeing all of that, and he's basically, okay? He's seeing all of that. And basically, what we need to understand is that we need to be able to do what Srila Prabhupada did. He accepted the environment. He began acting on it with courage. $7 in the pocket, right? No, nothing else other than his Bhagavatam, other than the clothes and so on and so forth. That is Srila Prabhupada's condition when he first came. Okay. Yeah, I was just corrected by someone who sent me a message saying it is not Prabodhananda Saraswati, it is Prakashananda Saraswati. I made a mistake, I forgot. It is Prakashananda Saraswati. So there was just correction. The incident with Mahaprabhu was with Prakashananda Saraswati. So the point we wanted to make was that Srila Prabhupada gave us a demonstration of being able to accept the environment. He accepted the environment, he acted upon it with courage. And what was the result? The result was the whole world received Krishna consciousness. Krishna used him in 10 years. Which 70-year-old man could have gone around the world as many times as Srila Prabhupada did to build 108 temples in 10 years, train people who had absolutely no connection to India or Vedic paradigm? They were practically taught how to wear saris and how to wear dhoti and so on and so forth by Srila Prabhupada. Right from scratch, you take them from that level and then you bring them to the level of being able to give others Krishna consciousness. That is Krishna. And that is possible when there is Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarori Vasaishnuna, Amani Manadena. Before coming to America, Srila Prabhupada was sitting in Mayapur. It is said that he was sitting in the Advaita Acharya's mandir. And he was actually chanting very softly on the beads, and he was also crying. The priest noticed him crying, and they all knew him then, because he was a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, many of them there. And he was saying that, how am I supposed to go abroad? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to preach in English? The spiritual master has asked me to go and do all of this. How am I supposed to do all of that? Because I have no qualifications. So he was crying and he was chanting, begging for help from Sri Advaita Acharya, begging for help from Lord Nityananda Ram, begging for help from Srila Haridas Thakur and Srivas Pandit and all those personalities who are a part of that environment. Because that environment was where a lot of strategy meetings took place to spread the mission in Gaudadesh, in Bengal. And Srila Prabhupada sat there to receive the benedictions and mercy from all those personalities, which is very critical, because that behavior shows that even though Srila Prabhupada himself had attained the highest level of attainment of being able to surrender to Krishna, in that position, he was able to see that there was a greater need to access help, which is exactly the position which Krishna would allow us. First of all, he would show the extraordinary Vraja environment when someone has attained high consciousness. At the same time, the person would feel that they are not qualified to be in that environment. They would also be eager to attain more. So it's a somewhat of a mixed bag, and it allows the person to access more at the same time they surrender. This is what Sriman Mahaprabhu demonstrated. It was demonstrated by Srila Prabhupada. It was demonstrated by so many of our acharyas, where they all demonstrated the fact that they were able to accept the environment as Krishna's gift. And then Krishna came through and was able to use them in his service. Okay, so we'll end here and we will see if we have any questions. Please do type in your questions at this time. I have one question. Your statement of difficulty in reconciling between being aggressive at workplace and come back to the life of a devotee of being humble is a great challenge. Can you please guide on how to deal with this difficult issue? Okay, the idea of how to deal with the issue of what we need to do at work versus what we need to do at home. First and foremost, what we need to do is that we need to center ourselves in being able to understand that the goal of life ultimately is to reach the point of being able to chant constantly. Kirtane Sadahari. So in that perspective, our going to work is not for the purpose of achieving wonderful accolades and so on and so forth. We are not against corporate achievements. However, our goal of life is to have the ability to chant the holy names without offense and being able to chant the pure name. Keeping that particular goal right in the center, then we would look at our workplace as a means to an end. That is the first change that has to come by. The workplace is a means to an end. It is not the end in itself. Once we look at the workplace as a means to an end, we will also examine what exactly needs to be done in the workplace for us to be able to contribute in the best possible manner. And what needs to be done in the workplace is for us to be efficient, for us to be able to do our very best in being able to achieve whatever is required, okay, in completing our task. But that is being done to ensure that we are able to do our duty, and we have absolutely no regard for the results that are going to come, because results are going to be given by Krishna. So if we approach the workplace like Arjuna approached the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where he understood that this is not something which is to my liking, my real liking is to, spend time with my dear Lord. He is, I'm a devotee of the Lord. My real liking is to not engage in all of this, but then this is for the pleasure of the Lord. It is a means to an end. This is exactly what that I need to do. Let me go and do it. So if we have some perspective of being able to act in the corporate environment as servants of God, knowing very well that we are actually in a journey, okay? Actually, we are in a journey. So being in a work environment is like being in a train compartment, which is going in a journey. So you're starting and you're trying to ensure that you're able to adjust. Sometimes the train compartment, you would have neighbors who stink. Sometimes you would have people who are obnoxious. Sometimes you have good people. Sometimes you have bad people, co-passengers. And we have to adjust and make sure that we pass through the journey. And because our ultimate goal is to get off in Raja. So we keep our ultimate goal in mind and understand that the work environment is a means to an end. We understand what needs to happen in the work environment to get the job done. We let go of results. In other words, we do not want to be so caught up in the results themselves, which is promotions and salary increases. We want to do our very best in terms of being able to work for a reasonable amount of time during the day without hampering devotional service, and we come back home. This way, what happens, we don't get affected as badly as if we were to keep the work environment in the center of our life. Okay, that becomes a deity, and we start worshipping that particular deity of accomplishments in the work environment. And then we come back home carrying all the nonsensical energy and nonsensical objectives as well, because it is nonsensical if it has come to the center. If anything pushes Krishna away from the center, it's nonsense. So we bring that nonsense back home, we're going to suffer. Instead, if we understand that Krishna is always in the center, we go to the work environment and we go there specifically for us to be able to exercise, our Krishna consciousness. In other words, we go there for us to be able to use the salary, use the perks as a means to an end. It is a necessary part of our life. It is not life itself. If we go with that understanding, we'll be sufficiently detached and we would be able to project the right consciousness. Otherwise, we would project the wrong consciousness and we would get more affected. Aggressive at workplace is fine. It's fine. Arjuna would not have been able to win the war if he was less effective. It was a combination of Arjuna's efficiency and Krishna's blessings, effort and mercy. So in that sense, if your workplace requires that you be aggressive because you're managing a workforce, and you do so as a matter of duty without becoming attached to how the results are going to manifest, and you understand that your workplace is a means to an end, you can be protected. Otherwise, we would have serious issues, because we would be bringing in the workplace, and the workplace would become the center of our life, and that identity will take on all kinds of amazing forms and will consume us. We have to be very careful. And especially, what is the point in putting so much effort and energy in building an identity which ultimately is going to be taken away, by someone else, and it is so unsteady? It doesn't make sense. Most people should have this perspective that they're going to work as a means to an end. We should be very careful in understanding our goals. So, can you please explain on how to understand the thin line between being humble and a doormat? Being humble is an internal quality of being a servant of Krishna. Okay? Being a servant of Krishna, it's an internal quality of being able to accept the environment as Krishna's arrangement. That is humble. Okay? Does not mean that you become a doormat externally. You be humble internally of accepting everything as Krishna's arrangement and having the courage to act upon it. Okay? Humility is not a definition of wanting to be, have lower self-esteem. This is an internal quality of great strength that comes about when one understands the extraordinary potency of the Lord. It's an internal quality. False pride of thinking that we are anything more than insignificant comes about because we have really not understood Krishna. When we understand what Krishna is all about, when we understand the phenomenal spiritual sky, then everything will fall in place. So automatically, the internal quality of becoming humble would arise. It does not mean that we are externally a doormat. No. Externally, we act normally as required by duty. Was Arjuna expected to be a doormat on the battlefield of Kurukshetra? No. You do exactly what is required. You do everything as required, but internally you have the consciousness of someone who is very clear that his identity lies in Raja. Krishna is in the center. He has taken this up. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a magistrate. If you read his biography, which is available, right, then you will find out that in many, many cases, he was very definitive in passing judgment. He was a very efficient magistrate. He used to dispose of all cases in the first half of the day. And he was able to write 100 books. He was able to rediscover Sri Mayapur, re-establish, practically he re-established Lord Chaitanya's movement. Okay? Now, when he was able to do all of that, was he inefficient? He was not inefficient. Was he seen as being timid? No. He was seen as being humble because the British government arranged for transport. You see, if when we visit Mayapur, outside of his home, you have tracks, railway tracks. And those railway tracks are not in use anymore because there's no railway going on there. But those railway tracks were specifically set up by the British so that they could send a train to pick him up for work. The British had arranged for a train to pick up Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The whole village used to get into the train. And he used to sit on the floor because he would have no room to sit. Okay? So in that sense, he was quite humble because he used to look at the Dhamvasis, he used to look at those people who are a part of the Navadvip Dham, and he used to just accept his position. But at work, he was not inefficient. He was considered to be very efficient. He was not considered to be timid. He was quite authoritarian. Okay? And he had to be. He was the administrator of Jagannath temple in addition. You know, how could you be very, very, timid? He was internally very humble. Externally, he was acting exactly as he was required. Your statement of difficulty in reconciling between being aggressive at workplace and come back to the life of a devotee of being humble is a great challenge. Can you please guide on how to deal? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I look at something else? I thought I addressed this. Okay. Sometimes someone causes so much pain, we forget and forgive them, but the incident keeps coming to our mind. How do we deal with to make sure it does not impact our sadhana? Which means we have not forgiven them. That is number one. That's why it keeps coming back, because we're just making an attempt to forget and forgive them, but we have not really forgiven them. The more and more we are able to view that experience as being arranged by Krishna, we would have the ability to forget and forgive them. Okay? First, accept that that incident was required. Number two, conflict resolution requires, especially if we are devotees, conflict resolution amongst devotees or in the consciousness of devotees requires that we blame ourselves first. By taking the blame on ourselves in any conflict, even though it may not apparently be our fault, we are able to see through the conflict in a much better way. We are able to see the mechanics of the conflict. We can see what the motivation of the other person is and why they acted, so on and so forth. Okay? And then ultimately, we are able to release this energy if we are able to assist them. This assisting them need not necessarily be a fact of our wanting to forget everything. We don't need to forget everything. You got to remember that. Because we may never be able to forget everything. But we need to be able to process experiences in life. And how do you process something in life efficiently? You involve Krishna. So go back to that particular incident and look at it to see if we had any role to play. Take up responsibility for our role, and that would allow us to understand the motivations of the other person. And then understand ultimately that that experience was also caused because we had karmic reactions. We had a role to play. There was a karmic reaction. We had to experience that. And we experienced that karmic reaction as a matter of wanting us to improve. and become better servants. So once we do all of those exercises step by step, we would ultimately be able to, forgive them fully. But forgiveness is a quality of the mode of goodness. Passion is the quality of which makes us, become very attached to a certain circumstance or a certain viewpoint even. Ignorance is what helps us remember the past. Okay? When we remove the ignorance by understanding, number one, that experience was also a part of our own learning, that experience was also a part of our playing a role in some other lifetime, all of that would help us move forward to forgive them. Ultimately, it's a matter of higher consciousness for us to be able to move forward. Higher consciousness would allow us, if we move forward from, the passion and ignorance into higher levels of goodness, we would automatically be able to shed all these influences of the past. Otherwise, those past influences can be forgotten. We don't need to forget them. We just shouldn't be affected by them in an adverse manner. It shouldn't be so disturbing that we get great anger and so on and so forth. Okay? It shouldn't be. We don't want to forget. We want to forgive, process in a right way, and move on. Forgetting doesn't help because there was a lesson there even for us. And that lesson basically is important. It is unfortunate that when we go through experiences in the mode of good ignorance, it's very difficult to remove from the chitta, from the consciousness. The only way to remove it is for us to be able to link it to Krishna, understand that that was an experience that was required for our own well-being, understand that we had karmic reactions which put us in such situations. Otherwise, why would we experience it? Why is it that someone is experiencing something and someone else is not? Because there's karma involved. So we have to understand all of this in a larger context. Okay, I think there were 3 questions. I think I answered all of them. Yeah, let me just select. Ultimately, what do we understand from this verse? Ultimately, we understand that we must learn to keep goals in a very clear manner. Kirtane Sadahari is the goal. Trinadapi Sunichena is the process. How to execute the process is Trinadapi Sunichena. Why is it done? To remove obstacles. Keep that in mind. That is all we need. Okay, I don't see any other question. So I guess we have spent a good hour. So we will stop here, and in the next week we'll take on the new verse. If there are further questions, feel free to post them in the site, or you can write to me. I'm very lax now. It's been almost 2 weeks since I've been able to answer questions on the email. I have some backed up work to do, which I will try my very best to complete. Please forgive me if you're one of those who requires answers and I have not come back to you. It's just a matter of time. Just give me some time. Okay, so we'll end it here, and we'll meet again on Monday. Thank you very much for joining us. Hare Krishna.